Yo, 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 what's up, my fellow revolutionaries? And can I just say, Bush said, what's up, give up Saddam. Ooh, there we go. Thank you, Wings of Cheese. Can I ask, how long were you working no, how long were you working on that follow up to that killer opening line from the other stream? I believe it was yo, 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 what's up, give up Iraq, which I thought was fucking gold. And you followed it up nicely here. And I am definitely not disappointed with the follow up there. So, can I just say, to start us off, apart from my usual Friday introduction that I would normally give, not long. Oh, well, good. It's spontaneous. I like it. I like it. But I would have believed you if you said you'd been working on it for a while, because I would have been proud of that. Yes, before I do my usual Friday introductions, this is a ANZAC Day Special. It's a public holiday here in Oz. Okay, so in Australia, the I don't know, the land of the free, if you really want to call it that, the land of the rebellious, we shall be calling it today, because we're going to be looking at something very special. We're going to be looking at the ANZAC Day. We're going to be doing an ANZAC Day Special, but we're going to be looking at it through the lens of the diggers. Now, for all of you that are potentially watching this, that are Australian and you know about the ANZAC legend, potentially anyone who's coming in from overseas, the ANZAC legend, so that is an acronym, ANZAC, for the Australian New Zealand Army Corps, and the ANZAC is referred to as the military personnel that serve the two countries and those associated with the military, peacekeeping, defense forces generally. So everybody gets labeled with that, but like more, if you speak in more Australiana, so colloquially, they are referred to as diggers. Okay, so like this ANZAC stuff, while you pay all respects to it, don't get me wrong, the ANZAC stuff is a creation, like I would say, from the 80s, maybe the early 90s onwards, that legend was built up. But fair income Australians will refer to the legends that have given their all, that have paid the ultimate sacrifice, that have just, made public services in the military tradition. They will refer to those people as diggers. And that's what we are going to be looking at today, ladies and gentlemen. So, because it is 11 o'clock, I think that I would start with some formalities. So let me just say to you on Anzac Day, and for all the diggers out there, let us just take a moment to acknowledge that they shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget. Now that is from a poem, and that is one of the stanzas that comes from that poem, but it is a very significant piece of the Anzac culture and the Anzac celebrations or commiserations, however you really want to talk about it. But it's supposed to be, lest we forget, thank you very much, Wings of Cheese. It is supposed to be a solemn reminder to remember and honor those who have served and died in wars, conflicts, peacekeeping operations, and particularly those who fought in Gallipoli in World War One. However, let me just say, it goes back further than that. The legend of the diggers goes back much further than that. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at the Eureka Stockade, because that is where I believe that the term diggers and this love affair that Australians have with an association with this digger culture comes and stems from the Eureka Stockade, which was a very important piece of Australia's rebellion history. And it's rebellion not of the revolutionary kind, I would say, in the sense that, they weren't trying to create a world or a society just for miners, but it was a working class uprising, let me just say. So I thought it was absolutely, weren't they miners? They were. The Eureka Stockade rebels, let's call them, were miners. They were gold miners in Ballarat, in Eureka, and they were referred to colloquially as diggers. And so, like, miners generally were called, referred to as diggers. However, these miners who rebelled against the authorities, against the British authorities in Victoria at the time, in the colony, they were referring to themselves as diggers. And yes, Anzacs refer to themselves as diggers. So it's important to remember the real Australiana roots of these terms and like the legends themselves, because there's been a bit of a whitewashing in history to kind of get rid of, I think, the legend of the diggers. And I think that is a particularly reactionary historical whitewashing that has gone on in much of Western culture, with the rise of capitalism and like the rise of later forms of capitalism, like, you know, neoliberalism and stuff like that, where they focused more on kind of the military side of things and the military kind of the official ceremonies and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to remembering the actual kind of individuals, the people themselves. And that's why I want to highlight and spend a lot of time kind of focusing on the idea of diggers today on ANZAC Day, because they were the rebels who were fighting against the British authorities at the time to kind of basically get wins on the board for other miners and working people in Victoria, which is very, very interesting if you think about it. So let me give you the term digger. Okay, so the term digger, commonly used to refer to Australian soldiers, has its roots in the gold fields of the 19th century, and particularly during the Eureka Stockade of 1854. At that time, digger was a colloquial term for miners who were actively involved in gold prospecting. These miners, often referred to as diggers, played a central role in the Eureka Rebellion, a significant event in Australia's history that symbolised the fight for democratic rights and resistance against oppressive colonialisation. Victoria has pretty good history of class struggle. It does. I must say, I do, as someone who is a native to New South Wales, I do envy the fact that Victoria seems to have all the sick, rebellious kind of history, or a lot of it, and has a lot of good kind of flashes in the pan when it comes to working class struggles. The Eureka Stockade contributed to the use of the term digger in the Australian context, associated with the notions of egalitarianism and mateship. So there you go. What an interesting kind of history of the term digger. It's got to do with mateship, and it's got to do with like levels of equality, because yes, the people that were at the Eureka Stockade, the miners, were fighting against unjust taxes that they had to pay. They were paying exorbitant license fees to the colonial authorities to be able to prospect for gold in Victoria. And like they had a couple of run-ins with the British soldiers, let's say, and like, you know, some things escalated, and then they mounted a rebellion. And obviously the authorities came in and crushed that rebellion, but it has gone down in Australian folklore and has been an important part of our culture ever since. And the Southern Cross flag, that Eureka flag that you definitely have seen around, it is still a symbol not only of like rebellion in Australia, but a symbol of the working class movement. A lot of unions fly the Eureka Stockade flag, also just known as the Southern Cross flag, as they demonstrate and just as a general symbol of the working class. And what a better symbol of the working class in Australia than the Southern Cross. And like, these people were working as miners. They were working out in the open under the gaze of the Southern Cross all the time, and they took that symbol. And like I said before, like, this was for a large part about egalitarianism and about producing a more democratic society. This is not the story that you're usually told when, like, you know, thinking about associations with the rebels of the Eureka Stockade, and like people that fly the Southern Cross. We've really disassociated this idea of them trying to get a fairer, like a fair go. And like we've disassociated with the fact that they were looking to set up a society where they were being less oppressed by the British. And like, you know, in the name of all things anti-colonial, like, hey, let's celebrate that a little bit more. This anti-colonial, anti-British, anti-authority sentiment. And that's what we should be in remembering on Anzac Day. Things like this anti-authority kind of sentiment. Because the Anzacs, the diggers, they were well known in the Australian, in the trenches, in places all around the world where we have served and fought under the guise of the British, especially. They were always known as being larrikins and not exactly taking seriously their British overlords. And like the British fucking couldn't stand that. They really hated that fact about the Australians, how they were autonomous, and they were rebellious, and they kind of did their own thing. You use garlic on a vampire, the Eureka flag on Clive Palmer, and they freeze into stone. And like that's a good thing. Like we should be wrapping our enemies and flying the Eureka flag in their face. Like, don't get me wrong, the Eureka flag and the Southern Cross have been co-opted by more nefarious right wing and like hard right. When I say right wing, I say hard, I mean hard right, kind of racist and white supremacist movements in this country. But like that does not mean it is no longer the territory of the rest of us. We can still lay claim to the Eureka flag, to the Southern Cross flag, and the symbol of the Southern Cross, despite the fact that like maybe hard right and very, very questionable groups have taken that on. It is still a symbol, a ubiquitous and unequivocal symbol of the rights of working class people and our fight for a more free and democratic system. So like never cede the Southern Cross, I would say. Never cede the Eureka Stockade flag to like, you know, some hard right radicals. No, it's all of ours. It's all of ours. And we should remember that on Digger Day. I'm not going to really refer to it as Anzac Day anymore because that also denotes the New Zealanders, and like nothing against the New Zealanders, but today it's about the diggers, and that's what we are going to be celebrating. So let me give you some very, very interesting words and mottos that were used by the diggers at the Eureka Stockade. And this will blow your mind from a revolutionary perspective, because it fucking blew my mind. Let me tell you that much for free. Okay, so here's the most famous saying or motto that they were shouting from the stockade against their British colonial oppressors. They were yelling, "The Muffin Man, sup bro, how are you? Welcome to this special Australia Day, Digger Day live stream that we're doing. We're learning about Australian history and specifically about the Eureka Stockade, because this is the birth of the idea of the diggers, and that is as Australiana as you can get it. Okay, it really is. Now, one of the most famous slogans that they were thrown around at the old British oppressors were, "We swear by the Southern Cross to stand truly by each other and fight to defend our rights and liberties." Like this really was, like if you think about that language, like we stand by each other to fight and defend for our rights and liberties. This really was like our version, like in a very, you know, small way. This really was our version of like an Australian Revolution or something like that. So like the American Revolution or the French Revolution. Like these were liberatory statements and feelings. They wanted equal rights. They wanted rights in the first place. They didn't really have rights. And they wanted to make sure there was rights for everyone that was in the so-called Australian working class at a microscopic version of the October Revolution. Yeah, well, like, and the numbers show as well, like there was really small numbers of people, but like, they were standing for an ideal, and the ideal was like, rights and liberties for working people in the colonies. And like they didn't really have rights before because it was a fucking monarchy. And so like whatever the governor said, whatever the authority says goes, and it's like they have absolute power and impunity, and like everybody else were just subjects of those colonies. In Canada we stood under Great Britain. Yeah, well, unfortunately all of us Commonwealth plebs have had to deal with this stuff. Another motto of the Eureka Stockade: no taxation without representation. Like this is exactly what they were spouting 100 years before in the American Revolution, the American War of Independence. They were fighting on a platform of no taxation without representation. God save the banker. Yes, upside down smiley face. Thank you very much. So like they were borrowing slogans from the American Revolution and using it in the Eureka Stockade. This was really about, again, like I said, liberties and rights for Australians. They also used liberty, equality, fraternity. Like I was saying, this is a direct motto and quote that they took from the French Revolution. And this was adopted by the Ballarat Reform League. This was borrowed from the French Revolution and symbolized the democratic and republican ideals that inspired many of the diggers of the Eureka Stockade. And another one of their sayings, the last one I've got for you: the diggers are of the people and they stand by the people. Again, very, very American Revolutionary style quotation and sentiment going on there. So that is basically a wrap on why I wanted to do a stream like this today. Like I said, all respects to the ANZACs and the idea of the ANZACs and the coalition between our two great countries, Australia and New Zealand, and our heritage. But like, I would like to take it back to its roots, before even preceding the idea of the ANZACs, with the idea of the diggers, because that is as Australian as you can get it. These miners who were working out in the late 19th century in, uncharted by European standards territory, basically living and dying on the fields, out in the plains, out in the bush, trying to make and scratch a living in Australia. And they were getting squeezed by the man, the British oppressor, and they stood against it. It was a quick stand against it, let's be honest. We're going to find that out with the documentary that we're watching today. It was a very quick stand, but these people have been immortalized in the Australian legend, and they are the diggers. And so we should remember that. So if you go out today for any ANZAC Day celebrations, if you're going to go and play two up, you're going to go to the pub and have a beer, if you're going to just go out and generally socialize. I was at a dawn service this morning. I live streamed it. So I hope if anyone saw that, they enjoyed the celebrations. It was very moving. And like it was a nice way of remembering, lest we forget. But if you're going to go out and you're going to see anyone today, please refer to them as a digger, or just use it as a general sentiment to celebrate this occasion. And we're going to learn about that history today. So yes, I hope you're enjoying your ANZAC Day. And now, after I've done that massive introduction, let me do every day it's a crime to be a free thinker and ask questions. Thanks, bro. You do amazing work. Thank you, Muffin Man. I appreciate that. I really do. And that's why I really like to jump on these opportunities to look at some history and learn the real facts and reality behind the big stories and stuff like that. I like your knowledge. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. And thanks for coming in to a Friday stream. And yes, now we've done the special ANZAC Day introductions, I would like to do my usual Friday introduction, which is this is Friday. And for Australians, it's a public holiday, but for anyone else tuning in around the world and it's not a public holiday for you, let me just say Friday is a very special day on the working week. It is the eve of the weekend, a day in which capital cannot touch us in the working class. If it does touch you, then I hope you get penalty rates and you get compensated for having to work on the weekend, which is, like I said, the time that capital is supposed to leave us of the working class alone. So on the eve of the weekend, I would like to pay my respects to workers, past, present, and emerging. And if you are working class and you're listening to this, I would like to say and show my respects to you, and vive la révolution. Let's bring on the working class revolution. It's coming. LOL. It's 9:21 p.m. here. I have plumbing school at 7 a.m. I have to wake up at 4:30. Well, you, my friend, are exemplifying the ideals of the working class. And today we are going through Australia's very working class history. Like I said, in honour of ANZAC Day, and in particular honour to the diggers, we will be looking at the history of the Eureka Stockade. So let me turn my screen over to that. And I just want to, for anyone that may have missed it, let us just go over this very important refrain for ANZAC Day and for our diggers. Let us just say again, they shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. And we all say in response, lest we forget. Lest we forget our diggers. My brothers and sisters and fellow revolutionaries, you know who you are. And so, in honor of those diggers, let's find out where Australia gets its rebellious kind of history from. So I'm going to change scenes to this very interesting documentary. It's by a channel called The Incredible Journey. I've watched just a little bit of it, and it's like a proper school time documentary. Something that your teachers would have put on when they really didn't want to, teach you, I guess, and they wanted a break. So we're going to watch one of those school time documentaries. Shit wizard equals plumber in Australia. Can we just do that today? Actually, thank you, Stephen Zed, for that. If anyone's got some really good Australian quotes, Australiana, some I don't know, yeah, it's just some gold Australian vernacular and vocabulary to use. Throw it in the comments when you see something good. And I've found out, and someone can fact check with this for me if you want, but fair income, when Australians say fair income, apparently that is supposed to mean that's when people find gold and they're getting it tested to see if it's the real deal. They say fair income, and a eureka moment and all that sort of stuff. It's all associated with this type of stuff. So if you've got any good Australian vocabulary to throw in the chat, please do not be shy. Just shit wizard. That is hilarious because I'm actually not come across that one before. So thank you, Stephen Zed. Let's have a look at this very school time Australiana documentary and learn about the Eureka Stockade, because I've actually wanted to jump into the Eureka Stockade for a while now. I've been looking for a good excuse for that. Is that French that you're putting in there? Ben Vion donc? Is that a Canadian thing? But yeah, I've wanted to look into the Eureka Stockade for a while because I knew it was an important part of our culture and our revolutionary culture here in Australia. As I will say to you now, the people in this story are no French, not today, French Canadian. LOL. Okay, fair enough. The people in this documentary might say that this has got nothing to do with any type of revolutionary culture in Australia, but I would beg to differ, because these people were looking for democratic rights. They were looking for rights generally in a time where that sort of stuff was not acceptable and on offer to Australian people. All Australian people, all people in this continent, might I add. And the British authorities were not going to have a bar of that. And we wouldn't have had developments that we did for working class people if it wasn't for the Eureka Stockade. It's not real language. Okay. All right. Oh, it's not a real language. Well, look, as I said before, the diggers of the Eureka Stockade did pay homage to their French counterparts because they actually used liberty, equality, and fraternity as one of their slogans at for the Eureka Stockade. So they were revolutionaries at heart if they were using slogans like that. So let's watch some school time Australian documentary, and you know the drill. Stop in the comments if something comes up, or if you think we all should be hearing about something incredible, and I will stop and we will converse. With Gary Kent. All right, Gary, what you got?
This is the flag that inspired a rebellion.
Oh, it's going to be good already. This is a flag that inspired a rebellion. An old bloke at the pub used to say there's two languages in this world, English and gobbledygook. Very good. Not a great sentiment, but Australian nonetheless. Thank you very much, Sherry Poppins, and it's good to see you. Happy Digger Day. That's what we're doing here today. In respect to the Anzacs and their long history that goes well beyond the Anzac legend. So thank you very much.
That inspired those at Eureka. It was sown in secret. The people sheltering in the Eureka Stockade didn't want to change the system of government. They wanted to be included in it. They weren't insurgents. They were not revolutionaries.
I beg to differ.
They rebelled against vicious treatment by police when all peaceful means of protest had failed. They sewed a flag and built a fence. They fought back. And today all of us are the beneficiaries.
Everyone needs to join their union. The only reason why unions have been getting a bad rap lately is because the bourgeoisie knows that when we unite, they become powerless. That's right. They get very nervous when working people get together. Hence the onslaught, the never-ending onslaught that they do in this country to attack very legitimate organizations, might I add, unions, which are not only legal organizations, but are represented and acknowledged as human rights by the UN, but they are attacked non-stop by the Australian media, by the Australian political establishment to degrade them. And like that is because when people get together, they have a lot of power. And you're right, the bourgeoisie knows that. They know that because these liberal democratic societies that we live in, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to call it, whatever, but like people do have power in those systems when they come together. And it's, you know, ANZAC Day is a good day for that sort of stuff coming together. So whether you're having a beer at 6 o'clock in the morning, Jerry Poppins, or you're going to a dawn service, or you're going out to play two-up, whatever it is, people coming together always makes the bourgeoisie a little bit nervous.
Of their fight. The story of the Eureka Stockade is more than just a famous battle in our history. It's a fundamental milestone on Australia's road to democracy. In today's episode, we will travel back to the 1850s and walk with the gold miners and their families from Bakery Hill to the Eureka Stockade.
Inspiring music. How good's that? Do you feel inspired? Let me know.
This is Peter Laylaw. He was elected as a Victorian Member of Parliament in 1856 and served as the Speaker of the House here for 7 years from 1880 to 1887. But in 1854, after leading a rebellion of gold miners at Eureka, 27-year-old Peter Laylaw was the most wanted man in Australia.
I think we should remember that. Peter Laylaw. I have to look into him after we finish with this documentary, huh?
With a reward of over $25,000 for anyone who handed him into the police. How Peter...
Ollie Atlas doing the roll call. How are you? Welcome. Today we are doing something important. We are looking at some Australian history, some rebellious history. This is part of the Australian legend. It's called the Eureka Stockade. And it was when a bunch of gold miners, freelancers, rebelled against the British oppressors, the colonial powers, to get better working rights for working people. Jade, welcome back. I remember learning about Layla in school. See, I don't remember learning specifically about this event, like very briefly, and I don't remember any of the names or anything like that. So, yeah, it would be good to kind of do a bit of a deep dive into Peter Layla when we get a chance. Hey. Oh, she looks a bit like Icky Vince McMahon, who I think is the CEO. Yeah, it's that head of hair. It's glorious.
Laylaw went from rebellious fugitive to a long-standing member of parliament in only 2 years is just one small part of the fascinating story of democracy in Australia. The Eureka Stockade is often referred to as the Eureka legend or a revolution. The reality is just a sad story of violent bloodshed. It's the events before and after Eureka that are legendary in their own right and were the foundation for a freedom we take for granted today.
So epic. It is, it's there.
Over 270 soldiers.
Oh, I did Year 12 Australian history in the Paleolithic. Whoa. What do you mean by in the Paleolithic? I didn't even know there was an option for Year 12 Australian history. Well, I'm learning a lot today.
Soldiers were instructed to attack the stockade built at the Eureka mining site at 4 a.m. on Sunday morning. They silently surrounded the sleeping miners in the stockade. There was a 15-minute battle. The diggers in the stockade at the time were asleep, outnumbered, outgunned, and unskilled fighters. The tragedy happened after the battle. It was bayonets, not bullets, that did the most damage. Crazed soldiers and police thrust their blades into the dead and dying. Others surrounded tents and sliced and jabbed at the bullet-riddled canvas. Then the order was given to burn to the ground all the tents in the stockade and vicinity. Tents were set alight with people still asleep in them, or still containing bodies of wounded or dead. By the time the sun was up, it was all over. The troops and police returned to their camp cheering. Meanwhile, the people of
Fucking coppers. There you go. There it is. I'm going to say it once today. I'm allowed to.
Ballarat woke to the smell of burning canvas and the sounds of weeping. A local man wrote in his diary,
"The brave, noble
The lucky country. Remember that.
hearts did not turn their swords on armed men, but galloped among the tents, shooting at women and cutting down defenseless men, new widows recognizing the bloody remains of a slaughtered husband, children screaming and crying around a dead father. Cowardly and monstrous cruelties. It is a dark, indelible stain on a British government."
Fuck the Brits.
just 7 days after Victoria declared its independence from New South Wales, gold was found in central Victoria. When gold was discovered, it seemed that overnight, the workers of Australia had gone AWOL. Farms, building sites, ships, police barracks, government offices, shearing sheds, all were deserted. News of Victoria's supposedly infinite supply of gold was shared in newspapers and letters in London, Edinburgh, Dublin, Paris, Warsaw, Munich, Washington, Toronto and Shanghai. And the people rushed to Victoria.
Look at that. Well. I studied the Muffin Land history and Santa Claus religion. Doesn't seem very lucky. Well, not for these people, apparently. With a description of the events like that, it's pretty damning. Now, let's just take a moment to realize that, like, this is, full-blown capitalistic society, industrial revolution, fully underway back home in Britain. They are looking for endless streams of capital from the colonies to get to feed the empire. And here they go. They've struck an endless supply of gold, quote unquote, in Australia, and they're going to exploit that system for all it's worth. And who are going to suffer? Obviously, the inhabitants of Australia. They're going to suffer the most from that arrangement under the rule of the British Empire. And can we just take a moment to realize and to acknowledge that once a word got out throughout the country and the globe, but throughout the country, workers from all over Australia were just like, fuck this, I'm going to Victoria. And they just put down, abandoned their job sites and rushed. This is really a great working class tale. It's shaping up quite nicely for us working class revolutionaries here. The Commonwealth is a continuation of the British Empire. It is, unfortunately, in one way or another, in a very globalized sense in the modern era. Looks like Timu JFK.
The early diggers of the 1850s were not the professional miners of the 1860s, a decade later. They were individual speculators, anxious about their families' living conditions, eager to make their fortune with gold and go home. Gold mining was backbreaking hard work with no guarantee of a find. For every family that did well, 2 or 3 lived in complete poverty. In order to dig, each miner had to purchase a monthly gold license like this one, which cost the equivalent of 1 week's wages. The license fee was a head tax, not an income tax, and it was instantly detested by all the miners. You could sink a shaft.
Nobody likes a tax, apparently. Just trashing the hair, yeah. It's a great head of hair.
Next to your neighbour, you could both wallow in the dark and wet earth for 5, 6, 9 months, bailing out the constant seeping water. And your neighbour might find the gold-infused riverbed, while your hole leads only to a bend in the underground river, missing the gold completely. He wins, you lose. But you still have to pay your license fee, month in, month out, gold or no gold. Digger hunts were conducted 5 days a week. 16 bullies on horseback, their muskets loaded and swords drawn, would descend on the diggings. Accompanied by 50 soldiers on foot, armed with clubs, they would demand each digger show their licence on the spot. Those without a licence, even if it was left in a tent, would be chained to tree logs once the tiny lockup was full. Honest but poor licence defaulters were chained together with hardened thieves and assorted ex-convicts from Van Diemen's Land. Women were incarcerated with men. This is Bakery Hill in Ballarat. It's at a junction of several key roads in the city. Today, it's filled with shops and restaurants. In 1854, Bakery Hill was much the same. It was the natural hub of Goldfields activity because all roads met in this natural gully. It was here that the hotels, gold buyers and merchants congregated. On the 11th of November 1854, a scorching hot Sunday, 10,000 people met here at Bakery Hill to complain about the police and the licence hunts.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. What does it say on the plaque? Get rid of those captions. Ooh, that's a French name. Charles Daudet? Daudet? Swearing all allegiance to the Southern Cross, 1854. Swearing all allegiance to the Southern Cross. Look, I'm just going to put it out there on this very special ANZAC/Diggers Day. Let's just redo the Australian Constitution. Let's revolutionize Australia, turn it into a republic. And from now on, when you want to pledge your allegiance to something, Australians should be pledging or swearing their allegiance to the Southern Cross. I think everyone can get down with that. If there are any Australians listening to this right now, tell me in the comment section what you think of that. Because again, this is part of the motto, part of the legend of the Eureka Stockade, they were all about the representation and the symbolism of the Southern Cross, which I think we have forgotten. And like, I think this ANZAC legend has been built up greatly around kind of this military history, and we've forgotten this culture of the diggers. As an American, gladly. Kids in the Bronx who don't know what a computer is can cure a bad day. Battler's Tavern. What a name. I know, right? There's some sick history going on here. Battler's Tavern, swearing allegiance to the Southern Cross. I will take that any day. And what does it represent other than the stars? The stars themselves. That's it. And it's like better than swearing any allegiance to any person or any religious kind of ceremony or anything like that. It's very natural, I would say, and very egalitarian. If this is truly the sentiment of what they were going on here, mateship, a bit of democracy, fighting for people's rights, swearing allegiance to the stars themselves. Why the fuck not?
The Ballarat community wanted to express outrage that their licence fees were used to support a police force that did not prevent crime and was mostly corrupt. At this
It is
meeting,
humbling, yes.
the Ballarat Reform League was established. They drafted a document, the Ballarat Reform League Charter. We can easily read this document today at the old Treasury building in Melbourne. Anyone can freely visit the old Treasury building here in Melbourne and wander into this room. Here under glass is the faded blue paper of an original copy of the Ballarat Reform League Charter. In this quiet room, it can be easy to forget the angst and frustration that resulted in the drafting of this document. The Bakery Hill meeting on the 11th of November 1854 is now considered the first formal step on the march to Australian democracy.
That's a pretty iconic moment then. That's huge. Hey, this is a massive part of Australian history. Like, I had no idea. Maybe Jade, our resident Australian Year 12 historian, might be able to clarify some things. But like, if historians, have got consensus on anything, but they're starting to put this down as, step number one towards Australian democracy. And this was a rise, a rebellion of Australian working people that abandoned their usual day jobs in the droves to go down to Victoria to have the prospect of finding something that might support their families and give them the edge in surviving on the Australian continent. It was working people that nudged us towards a democratic society and one where we have, a little bit more, we have rights and liberties. And well, it was ages ago, very large proportion of working class Australians flocked to Ballarat, so it's pretty representative. It's really working class. I'm loving this history story so far, and I'm loving, you're right, Wings of Cheese, this guy's presentation. It's the hair. He's very grippy.
What did the diggers write in their charter? The charter laid out 5 basic demands: free and fair representation for all in Parliament, votes for all men without any property conditions, ability of any person to stand for election to the Legislative Council, salaries for those elected, and fixed terms for those elected. Sound familiar? Each of these 5 points we take for granted today. Each of them.
This is quite revolutionary. I don't know what this guy's talking about, but he doesn't have a good understanding of what the word revolution means. So let me just school him and help re-enlighten everyone that's listening to this right now. A revolution is not an insurrection. It's not a coup. It's not some type of violent takeover. It's when real people of a social organization of some sort, so a group in a state or a territory or a nation or what have you, sit down and try to figure out how they should organize themselves politically. And if these are the demands of these people, they want representation. They want to make sure that they have the ability to be involved in the political process without any strings attached. So like, you know, a lot of like democracies around the world started off, especially at this time, with like, okay, we can have democracy, but like you have to have property, or if you have to have a certain number of amount of income and paying so much tax before you can be represented in the political system. These people are advocating for actual enfranchisement for the entirety of the population. That is very revolutionary stuff, especially for this time period. Like, you know, 1848 in Europe is the age of revolutions, and this is 1854 we're talking about. It is no coincidence that these people are speaking about getting rights on the board for all people. This is a form of a democratic revolution, or at least a revolutionary sentiment, because these people are speaking about unalienable rights for people that live in this colony or the state of Victoria at the time. I'm from, how do I say that, Narungga country, which had copper mining. The miners left. A lot of Chinese and Americans came too. Yeah, there was a lot. I think the word fair income actually comes from the Chinese. It was an old Chinese word for gold, apparently. So yeah, there's a lot of, yeah, and like there were a lot of Chinese in Australia during the gold rush and stuff like that. And a lot of them settled here and, you know, are very Aussified now. Also happened here early on. Game is rigged. It is.
Them are vital to the operation of Australia's federal elections. The members of the Ballarat Reform League didn't just pull these requests from thin air. To understand why they made these requests, we need to look at the background of the members themselves. This is a map that is part of the Eureka Memorial in Ballarat. Those who emigrated in their thousands to the Victorian goldfields aspired to something different from the old power structures they knew at home. These dates on the memorial
1776,
are
American Revolution, 1789, French Revolution, 1848, there you go, the age of revolutions in Europe. There it is. All of this influence, all of this cultural influence coming down, and these people, these miners are looking for a fair go. They're looking for a fair go. That's all they are asking for. Very basic, very standard working class sentiment. Not hard to deliver on, honestly. We live in a society, we all work together. Not hard for, like, you know, people to live in a society where you get a fair go. I think it is a very, very rudimentary request. And if governments and authorities can't make that happen, then you know my answer to all of that. The word starts with an R. I'll let you guess.
code for understanding the demands in the Ballarat Reform League Charter. 1776 was the American War of Independence. Many miners in Ballarat came from California, bringing with them values of personal freedom and independence. 1789 was the French Revolution, which shocked Europe when it deposed a monarchy and established a French Republic. 1798 was the Irish War of Independence, and many miners were Irish. 1848 saw the formation of Italy as a country. In 1854, all of these global forces for change and revolution are not just dull history lessons.
It's not just Italy that's there. You can see there's Germany, you can see Spain, you can see France, like Austria. Like this was the age of revolutions in Europe. This is the time where Karl Marx is writing. He is writing around this time about things like the Communist Manifesto and stuff like that. He's writing and formulating Das Kapital. Like this is the revolutionary epoch, and they're trying to bring in democratic societies. And so like this sentiment is just bouncing around all around the world, and these miners in Victoria, these diggers, are bringing that back. Looks like Marty McFly, but decided to become a crime reporter for 60 minutes. He does have a 60 minutes vibe to him, this guy, doesn't he?
For the miners, the diggers here in Ballarat, they are lived experiences. Topics for newspapers.
Yes, I've heard about that actually. Mark sent a letter to Abraham Lincoln to congratulate him because he was actually doing reporting at the time for American newspapers, I'm pretty sure, or for journals, however they used to call them.
Articles and debate. The very fabric of the social structure of the world was being tested and changed through these events. This was the melting pot of Eureka. Every single miner was aware of some kind of cultural struggle or change in their home countries. On the 29th of November, at another monster meeting on Bakery Hill of 15,000 people,
Jeez.
almost half the total population of Ballarat at the time, many diggers lined up to throw their licenses on a bonfire, an act of communal protest. A flag was hoisted, not a national flag, but a purpose-made flag. This is the flag that we now know as the Eureka flag. The people of Ballarat called it the Australian flag. It was inspired by the one thing that united each and every resident of Ballarat, the constellation of the Southern Cross. Those 5 bright stars were the first.
Watched a Mr. M history video recently after this, the Queensland miners and shearers union strikes led to the start of Labor. Well. And guess what? Labor, the Labor Party that we know today, has its origins as a socialist party. It was registered as a socialist party. And lest we forget that most people have forgotten that heritage. Most people don't know that heritage, actually. Well. Eh? Miners and shearers, the old unionists themselves leading and forming something that would turn into a registered socialist party.
Thing that immigrants saw when they crossed the invisible line in the ocean into the Southern Hemisphere. The Victorian governor had rejected the charter presented by the Ballarat Reform.
What was the motto that came from the charter? Let me just check what we had talked about in the introductions from the Reform. Eureka Stockade. Here, this is from. So this is the oath sworn by the miners at Bakery Hill on the 29th of November 1854 under the Eureka flag. We swear by the Southern Cross to stand truly by each other and fight to defend our rights and liberties. It could have been just very kind of French or American revolutionary in the sense of just being we swear to fight and defend our rights and liberties. But what I like about this one, and it signifies that a very Australian idea of mateship, but here it is. We swear by the Southern Cross to stand truly by each other and fight to defend our rights and liberties. And that is the sentiment of the diggers. When you hear people telling stories about the ANZAC legends, the diggers, the people that have, paid the ultimate sacrifice for this country, it's the one redeeming theme that runs salient through those conversations. It's mateship through and through. So it's not just about rights and liberties, these wonders of, liberal democratic societies, but it's also about standing by other people. Camaraderie. That's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. It's what's all about.
League.
And Democratic Party was formed out of the KKK. Don't please place too much stock in the past. That's funny. I don't know if it was formed by them, but they were definitely associated with, heavily associated with the Democratic Party. But you should put a lot of stock in the past, actually. Don't forget the history of where things have come from. That's what I'm saying. And if the Democratic Party has a checkered history with being associated with the KKK, then that should not be forgotten at all, actually. And it should be remembered because that is a significant part of American history right there. Is a significant amount of their working class were actually it was literally slave labor. And so I think it is actually quite important to remember that. I would just say. Very, very important. And so, like, just as important to remember that the Australian Labor Party is, or was, truly socialist. Like the British Labor Party, it was actually in the 90s, I think, under Tony Blair, where they got rid of one of their actual party objectives. Like up until the 90s in England, one of their objectives was seizing the means of production. That's fucking incredible. That's fucking incredible. And like, it's easy to erase that from history. And unfortunately, they have erased that from history. But like up until, very recently, the if you join the British Labour Party, one of your objectives was, yes, seizing the means of production. I wish that was still in the Labour Party's list of objectives.
The diggers felt under siege, ignored by the governor, no elected leader to represent them, and persecuted by the local authorities. They burned their licences in protest under a flag that united them and then went home. The next day, the soldiers and police decided to show force by instigating a massive licence hunt. The mounted police began to gallop among the tents, firing shots into the crowded tents where women and children were sheltering. The confused crowd tried to scatter. Police were pelted with mud, stones and broken bottles. Soldiers dropped to one knee and aimed their guns at the people. Miners jumped down holes, and women and men tried to disappear behind tents. As news of the chaos and random firing on the crowd, including women and children, spread, other sympathetic diggers downed tools to seek information. From all directions on the diggings, people walked in the direction of Bakery Hill. The Australian flag was once again flying. Those who came had lost faith in the government. Through hunger, grief, shame, disappointment, harassment, indignity, humiliation and powerlessness. The object was now self-defence. The leaders of Ballarat had shown that they would fire upon a civilian crowd. This was the way masters treated servants and dogs. The people looked for a leader.
I like this guy. I like his commentary. Let's just hear that one again.
Had shown that they would fire upon a civilian crowd. This was the way masters treated servants and dogs. The people looked for a leader.
What's
and
changed?
From the crowd stepped 27-year-old Irishman Peter Laylaw. His father was an Irish MP and his eldest brother had fought in the Young Irish movement in Ireland. Peter Laylaw stepped from the crowd and led the assembled group of 1,000 diggers, wives and children on a march from Bakery Hill to Eureka. They took the flag with them. The group, now led by Peter Laylaw, decided to throw up a hasty barricade. There needed to be a place of shelter to protect those diggers who had burned their licences. They grabbed any suitable material they could find to build a barricade. Overturned carts, empty barrels, felled trees, thick slabs used to line mine shafts. When it was finished, Peter Laylaw led the group back to Bakery Hill and raised the Australia flag. He then kneeled, removed his hat, and raised his hand towards the flag and made this oath.
We swear by the flag of the Southern Cross to stand truly by each other and fight to defend our rights and liberties.
The group moved back down the hill to the stockade. It was
Don't know about that accent, but like, it's a good oath. Stand by each other. That's what you need to remember.
sunset Thursday evening. There would be a standoff until
Sounds like a quote from Warhammer 40k. Yeah, it's fucking hardcore, eh?
just before dawn Sunday morning. Twice
That's the worst. Yes, I don't know about that accent. I don't know what that was. But like, you know, must have been smoking a few darts before they did that take. Like a lot of darts. Smoking heaps of darts and breaking hearts right before taking the knee to take the oath under the Australia flag. It's interesting that they're calling it that. Not Australian, but the Australia flag. You know, I would swear some allegiance. I would do some oaths under an Australia flag, to be honest. I thought it was like an old-timey British or Yankee. Sounded like they were going to vomit. The whole doc is a lesson in trying too hard in the best possible way. Except for this guy. Whatever his name was. Gary Hunt or something. He's not trying hard at all. It's just all smooth for this gentleman here.
Over the next 2 days, Peter Lalor sent representatives to the government camp to try to negotiate a suspension of the licence hunts until the people had the opportunity to put their case against the licensing system to the governor. The representatives were ignored. During the day, there were at least 1,500 people crammed into the stockade. Most slept in their own tents at night, as the stockade was to prevent the arrest of unlicensed diggers, and there had never been a licence hunt at night. The diggers expected that Sunday would be the customary day of rest, and many of them left the stockade on Saturday evening to do things with their families. The stockade emptied out. Even the local priest encouraged everyone in the stockade to come to church on Sunday. Many of the soldiers at Ballarat had been on 24-hour sentry duty for days, without sleep, washing, or changing clothes, and it had been pouring rain overnight. The soldiers and police were badly paid and living in
Nah, not Gary Hunt. It's mainly it's Marty McFly. Gary is a fake name after his fall from grace. I know the truth. I know the truth, damn it.
conditions. Over 540 weary soldiers were kept on constant alert by the military captain, fed on rumours of an imminent attack. The order was given to march on the stockade at 2 a.m. The soldiers eagerly made their way here to this ground. Today, Eureka is a lovely park, tall trees and a playground that's constructed to look like a stockade with soldiers out the front. In fact, it's so peaceful, we have to try very, very hard to imagine the
Don't try too hard. Jerry Poppins doesn't like it.
chaos, panic, fear and death that happened here. Following the battle, many miners and soldiers lay dead. Later that day, most of the dead miners were carried in rough coffins on drays here to Ballarat Old Cemetery and buried in a common grave. This monument marks the location and lists their names.
Canada, Ireland, Nova Scotia, Scotland, England, Ireland. All migrants. Hey? Hey? Anyone listening with that ye old anti-migrant sentiment going on? Hey? It's hard. It's easy to forget also the history of your nation. If speaking to any of the old colony representatives, the old Commonwealth countries that are listening in on this, it's easy to forget your entire nation is built on migration, or the majority of it. Old school solidarity, what most modern activists lack. Yeah, and there's a real sense of solidarity among these people. They have a shared concern. They have a shared grievance. And they have a shared and visible enemy. So it does help with the solidarity there. Our shared enemy hides in the shadows today. And it is difficult to overcome. And our fight is global. The stakes have changed. But solidarity is key nonetheless. Ollie Atlas. True and through and through. Afghanis opening up the outback to settlers. What's that a reference to? Please do divulge.
This is it. The flag that inspired a rebellion, that inspired those who were downtrodden to take a stand. There are squares missing because the soldiers cut out souvenirs. But it's still beautiful, isn't it? It was sewn in secret. Such a massive flag to sew secretly. The people in Ballarat were not disloyal to the Queen. They didn't want to change the system of government. They just wanted to be included in it. At no time did they launch an assault on authorities. They were not insurgents. They were not revolutionaries. They rebelled against an unpopular and viciously policed tax when all peaceful means of protest had been rebuffed. They fought back when attacked by the military in a preemptive strike intended to restore government authority without listening to the people. They sewed a flag and built a fence. 13 miners were selected to face charges of high treason. The trials dissolved in farce, making a laughingstock of the government. No jury would convict the miners, and there was no evidence of treason. A royal commission investigating the goldfields, recommending that the licensing laws be replaced with a system where miners paid a tax on gold they found rather than on the possibility of finding gold.
Interesting. Very interesting. Unrelated to today, but when should we watch that scam baiting documentary, the Khan he's talking about, the routes through the outback? The Afghanis used camels to traverse the outback. A lot of cameleers came over. Interesting. I didn't know that. Back in ye olden days. Reminds me of the peasant revolts of 1381. There you go. Very interesting. Yeah, I had no idea. What a multicultural setting in ye old early days of Australia. Chinese, Afghanis, Irish. Who else was listed on that thing? People from Nova Scotia. Is that Canada? And we got, there was Scotland too. England, obviously. The Eagle British. A lot of Afghani names in Kuberpedi. Well, there you go. Now, this is a day of learning, hey? On Digger Day.
The mining licence was replaced by a £1 yearly miner's right. Peter Laylaw came out of hiding, and in 1855, he was one of the 2 diggers' leaders voted into the Legislative Assembly to represent Ballarat. So, 1 year after the Eureka violence, the miners had representation in Parliament. Within 3 years, the right to vote was given to all male British subjects over the age of 21. This is the legendary result of Eureka. But equality wasn't given to all. Australia had to wait another 48 years before the passing of the Commonwealth Franchise Act in 1902 gave white women full political equality with men and made Australia the most democratic.
He said white, right? He did say white only, yeah. Let me just, white women.
Full political equality with men and made Australia the most democratic nation in the world. Aboriginal men and women would not receive these rights until the 1960s. Many of the issues simmering in Ballarat during 1854 were the result of poor actions by leaders in government, police and military. Corrupt leaders, selfish leaders, power-hungry leaders, leaders greedy for money and prestige. Today, we have the right to choose our political leaders who then regulate the laws.
Oof, 1960s. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. That's why he made the qualification. It said it was for whites.
That govern our police and military. It's a right we take for granted today. But in 1854, a bonfire of injustice and violence burned many who had been suffering in poverty without the right of representation. So how can we show that we appreciate the legacy of Eureka? How can we show that we value the gift of being able to have a say in the selection of our representatives in government? Well, while in prison, the Apostle Paul wrote many letters. In one letter to Timothy,
This is an
Paul
interesting one.
reminded him about the power of prayer in supporting leaders. Here's what Paul wrote. The first thing I want you to do is pray. Pray every way you know how, for everyone you know. Pray especially for rulers and their governments to rule well, so we can be quietly about our business of living simply in humble contemplation. This is the way our Saviour God wants us to live.
I didn't see the religious angle coming on this one.
So we're encouraged to pray for our government leaders. Pray that they will govern justly and honourably and in the best interests of our society.
I really thought he was going to go down some, democratic route and say, make sure you get out and vote and make your voice heard, or get involved with your community or something like that. But it was the religious angle he was going down. Interesting.
Pray that they will govern with wisdom and that their concern will be for the well-being of all. And pray that God will accomplish His purpose through them. Let's ensure that we don't take our democracy and freedom for granted. We need to remember that this freedom was paid for in blood at Eureka Stockade. Eureka is a reminder of the eternal human dream for liberty, equality, and freedom. A dream that belongs to everyone. A dream that will never perish from the earth. Why? Because God has placed the desire for freedom in our hearts. We weren't made to be slaves. We were designed to be free. And we cannot be satisfied or find peace until we are free. And this is true in a spiritual sense as well. True freedom, freedom from guilt and sin.
This is going down a very interesting religious trajectory here. There seems to be more quotes going on. Wonder what's going on there. Whatever. It was still interesting nonetheless. I thank you, Gary Hunt, or whatever your name is, for the legacy of Eureka. And so I might as well do a shout out to these people, just in case we get picked up for copyright infringement again. It's the Incredible Journey Ministry. Oh, it's a ministry. Oh, there you go. Wow, they're doing history stuff. Interesting. Bit of a tangent. You show your respect by letting hair take over your brain, seeping into the brain. It'd be funny if Marty McFly, Shields of Trumpet of Patriot, Clive Palmer comes into the frame with a donut. Harry Gunt sounds more fitting. Yeah, Harry Gunt. Harry Gunt. All right. Calm down. Well, look, this was very, very interesting nonetheless. And I would like to take a different spin on the lessons of this one in the face of what we see happening in the world today, in the Western democratic world today. All right. We are watching some significant events happening over in America at the moment, in the US of A, I'm referring to, not to, bunch the Canadians and the Central and South Americans in with people from the United States there, but we are witnessing some pretty crazy stuff going on in the US at the moment, stuff that really undermines democracy and liberty in the, in that kind of bourgeois liberal democratic sense. And so I think it is important to kind of take the time on days like this, on ANZAC Day, which we are referring to as Diggers Day, to remember events like this, people that have actually given their lives, paid the ultimate sacrifice so people like us could sit here, in an online community, coming through from places all around Australia, all around the planet. Let's be honest. We can sit here in luxury in luxury. Okay, like I've never had to burn a license and like really protest like that significantly and like, you know, blockade myself in fear of actual physical repression by an armed government force. And these people stood against that stuff, sent out representatives to government officials to actually try to plead their cases and just look for fair treatment. Fair treatment. When you talk about like, you know, kind of hard to define topics like democracy and liberty and all that, what does all that sort of stuff mean? These people were just looking for a fair fucking go. They didn't want to be over like charged because they couldn't afford it anyway. And like they were being charged whether they were lucky or not. And then they didn't want to be raided by basically arms of oppression from the government, like people that have the legitimate right to the use of violence. They were being basically attacked in like regularly and in an organized fashion by police and like military personnel. And like they had to stand up for it. And so like I think we should it's fucking courageous as fuck. And shout out to Cobar. Hell yes. Shout out to Cobar and all the regional areas in Australia that have contributed to like movements of the working class. Like we forget in the urban age as well how fundamental, especially in places like Australia and old colonial nations, like how important regional areas have been in the growth and the development of working class movements. Like Jade had said before, look at the history of the Labor Party. It came from shearers and miners' unions, and they formulated political parties off the back of that. They apparently weren't anti-paying tax either. They just wanted to be taxed on their earnings. Yes, another good point. And like they weren't even the aggressors in any situations either, which is not really the usual sentiment that comes out of any type of remembrance, as little as it is, for an event like Eureka Stockade. It really seems like, you know, a bunch of pissed off miners, like, you know, challenged government authority kind of thing. And it was like, it's very much not the tale of how things went down. And like to bring it back to what I started with saying was like, this was a battle for a fair go. And that's like, if you could capture in a sentiment what, you know, liberal democratic societies, Western society is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about allowing people to live a life where they have a level of dignity and decency and are able to have a fair go in surviving in a complex exchange society. This is what we live in today. We live in a capitalist world, and so we live in, you know, very complicated exchange relations with one another. You know, we don't live autonomously. We don't all feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, and like look after ourselves. We interact with the state. We interact with each other all the time, exchanging goods and services, selling our labor power to the highest bidder or for the best option and all that sort of stuff. We live in complex exchange situations, and we expect a fair go. And people have fought and died for that. That's what this day is about here in Australia. And that's what these people were doing at the Eureka Stockade. And they swore allegiance to it. They took oaths to these values under the stars. They didn't do it to a particular person. They didn't even do it to an ideal. They didn't do it for a religious purpose either. So I'm not sure exactly what Harry Gunt is going on about here. Or Harry Gunt. Like, I'm not sure exactly what he's doing, but like, I appreciate the fact that they took the time to put this documentary together because it has been rather informative. And like, I think, you know, we could learn a lot from, you know, swearing an oath to something that is much larger than any one human or any one group of people. You know, it's like, you know, to life itself, to the universe, pledging allegiance under the stars to the Southern Cross, the one thing that does really unite all the people that live in the global South, and especially for these people here. And so like, you know, this is really a time for us to, yes, remember that like everything else in the world we live in today, in a capitalist society, nothing comes for free. And so if you value like things like democracy, liberty, fraternity, equality, that shit don't come for free. People have paid dearly for that stuff. And we stand now in the shadows of that legacy. People sowed these seeds. They planted these seeds like, decades ago, hundreds of years ago now, for us to all, like I said, enjoy the shades and the protection of these very important values. And so, yes, this ANZAC Day Special, this Digger Day Special, was about learning about this type of heritage, a rebellious nature that I think Australians need to remember and need to carry on. It's an important legacy to be rebellious, especially in the face of encroaching power. Like I said, look at what is happening in the States at the moment. We need to remember that rebellious nature, and we need to remember, just like the oath that they took. Let me read it out one more time. It is, we swear by the Southern Cross to stand truly by each other and fight to defend our rights and liberties. This is more than just about rights and liberties. Those things mean nothing. They mean nothing without people. And so you can fight for ideals, but if you don't remember that the reason you're fighting for that is because so the person standing next to you has the same, has rights and liberties, then it's all meaningless. It's all meaningless. Many people like to use the quote, no one is free unless such and such is free, etc., etc. And there's a lot of truth to that type of sentiment. Let's be honest. And so thank you for joining me for this ANZAC Day, this Digger Day Special. Let us remember the diggers. Let us remember all the workers that have come together. All the workers, the original miners, the diggers of the Eureka Stockade, and let's be honest, all the members of the working class, working people, average working Australians and New Zealanders, who were the ones that were conscripted to go and fight in both world wars, the usual fodder that are used in militaristic endeavors. Let us remember all of the working people. And like I said, kind of at the beginning of the Friday stream, the usual note, let us pay our respects to workers past, present, and emerging. It is the working class, it is people like you and me that really do produce all of the value and all of the wealth in our society. And we deserve a fair go, and we deserve for our rights and liberties to be respected. These people fought and died for us to get them, and we should fight to maintain them and for them to be respected by authorities and by people with power. That's the important takeaway on a day like this. And so let us conclude then by just taking note. Carry the fucking torch. That's right, Wings of Cheese. We have an important responsibility. And that's the thing that holds a democratic society together is you have to have some level of responsibility. You cannot become complacent because as America is showing us right now, the US is showing us right now that it is very quickly to descend into what can be adequately described as fascism. You can get very dangerously close to a fascistic style of society where you have leaders and authorities who have blatant disregard for democratic institutions, for the judicial system, for common decency, fellow human beings, and just pick people off the streets, throw them in prisons, deport them. We can descend into authoritarian nightmares pretty quickly. And it is up to people like us, it is up to us, the working class, to responsibly keep those people in check. And that's what the Eureka Stockade was about. They were trying to keep the authorities in check, try to keep them honest. They weren't asking for much. Like Jade said, they weren't even asking to abolish taxes. They weren't anarcho-capitalists or something like that, or libertarians who don't want to pay taxes anymore and want to go off to a tax haven in the Bahamas. They just wanted a fair go kind of thing. And that's our responsibility, is to maintain the fair go. So let us remember the people, the working class, all the people of the working class the diggers out there that have given their lives and paid the ultimate sacrifice. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this ANZAC Day Special. I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to be back on Monday for another live stream here on YouTube. So if you've enjoyed the revolutionary spirit today, I do implore you to come to streams as much as you can. Like, share, and subscribe. Share as much of the content as you can so we can spread the message. But here's to the diggers. Here's to the diggers. And we pledge our allegiance to the diggers and to the legend and their legacy under the Southern Cross. So thank you, everyone. I will go through, because I think today has been a very special episode. So thank you, Wings of Cheese. The Muffin Man, it was good to see you. Stephen Zed, appreciate it. Jerry Poppins, for your cutting insights. Jade, our resident Australian historian, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Who else have we got here? Ollie Atlas, of course, our Americans correspondent for the day. Thank you for joining. Anyone else who's been listening in the background, I hope you've appreciated it. I hope you've enjoyed and learned something interesting. And now, for the Australians in the audience, and if there's any New Zealanders, go and enjoy your ANZAC Day. Go and be social if you can. I don't know, go and try and enjoy some festivities. Go play two-up, have a beer if you are of age, and enjoy your day where we remember and we pledge ourselves to each other and to our rights and liberties. Thank you, everyone. And please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery. I will see you all next week. Enjoy your weekend, and I hope capital cannot touch you.